would suggest that for any vivid perception of a particular object to occur, there needs to be a physical presence of the object in question. And this is, however, not the case. If we were to examine our own personal experience, we can observe that sometimes we can have very vivid recollection of objects as if it is really there in front of us. Quite a lot of ideas, Buddhist ideas of Vaibhashika school can be seen as sort of coarser, and other Buddhist schools have much more refined and subtler understanding of these issues. For one of the examples that Isolans gave was, according to Vaibhashika thought, the state of mind at the point of death could be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. However, other Buddhist schools have argued that the actual state of mind at the actual moment of the death is always neutral, because it's a very subtle state of consciousness. So we can see that there is a kind of a much greater refinement in other schools of thought.
Now, any 가다지 다 습기 any 기면 된 샤워 좀. 저자가 아들 또 샤워 타고 되지 전에 간다이니 마다웨라 가. 마다웨니 풍급 지식 취디다 고다 두 마다웨를 깨비 되잖아요. 대인이 봐 림베림베 봐 다루야 중그리디 이내 아니 싸워지 다그 풍급 지식 취 영초도 가서 봐. 저들이 미드산에 베나드다
The later Buddhist schools argue that when through spiritual process and path one begins to perfect and purify the negative aspects of our mind and body, as the pollutants of mind cease to exist, their manifestations and their consequences and imprints, such as the impure body and mind, may cease to exist. But however, this does not mean that the very continuum of the individual ceases to exist. There will be a level of existence which is perfected, which is pure, and which is free of these pollutants. And this is explained in terms of what the Buddhist literature describes as existence in a mental body. So the point is that there is a lot of debate on this point about what exactly is the nature of liberation, enlightenment, and so on.
전에다 가다지 탈병모 탈둔 쉐이르잖아요. 제가 받은 나와자게 이노 디 고든디 전도담인 담인지 스쳐 전도담인 숨기야리 and that deep 자오시르고 공부다 디
From the Buddhist point of view, the nature of true liberation or spiritual freedom has to be understood in terms of a quality of mind, freedom from the various negative aspects and the pollutants. And we find that according to Chantakirti, a famous Madhyamaka, a thinker, the liberation or true cessation is said to be ultimate truth. And the point being made here is that the understanding of the true cessation can only come about on the basis of an understanding of the ultimate nature of reality, in other words, emptiness, so that we see that it is the insight into emptiness, or it is the insight into ultimate nature of reality that allows the individual to eliminate the pollutants of the mind, and also it is the ignorance of this ultimate nature of reality that lies at the root of our obscuration and confusion and delusion. It is the emptiness of the mind at a perfected state, which is the true liberation. So what we find here is that the basis of true liberation is emptiness. The knowledge that by which we eliminate, we overcome the obscurations is also emptiness. And the final sort of perfected stage in which we attain such a liberation is also the emptiness of mind.
So tang godens lebdi chuni jigla godin shegi yardi yini khabarati lubruwe chimadi nyembu topji chamni ani lubur namdage yandan dandenge ji rengshingi nambar tawa detala bangja ganya rungwa ji nyembu chamni.
True cessation or liberation is a quality that has two dimensions. One is its total freedom from the pollutants, and one is it is the total negation of the inherent existence, self-existence. For example, we find in the first verse of Nagarjuna's Fundamentals of the Middle Way, when he pays homage to the Buddha, and he does so by saying that Buddha have taught the principle of dependent origination and emptiness. And there he describes true cessation in terms of the total pacification of all what he calls elaborations, conceptual elaborations. And it is when all the conceptual elaborations have been calmed and have been pacified, that's the true cessation.
다들네 샹드 되는 사디 샹드 되는 사디래야 가서 쉬는 샹드 사디래 다 양대 과디 지나를 레고요리 지금 당야라 샹 사디라 봐 샹 사디다 남게 태도 있음지들이 다 될라 아니 뒤다 터두 같은 양대리야 거야게 로티디
Compassion is that wish which spontaneously aspires all sentient beings to be free of suffering. And so compassion is said to be at the root of all altruistic activity and at the root of the altruistic intention. And so what is required is the cultivation of a compassion that is powerful enough, what the Buddhists call great compassion, that is powerful enough to lead to a sense of responsibility, that the individual practitioner feels truly compassionate, so that he or she feels committed to bringing about the well-being by the sentient beings. He or she feels committed enough to shoulder upon himself or herself the responsibility to make this happen. So what is required here is that kind of powerful compassion. And we find, if we look at the Mahayana Buddhist literature, we find this point repeatedly emphasized, the fact that compassion, the great compassion, is the foundation of all positive qualities. Great compassion is the root of all spiritual, Mahayana spiritual path. And great compassion is the root of bodhicitta. Maitreya says in his Sutra Alamkara, the ornament of sutras, he says that compassion is the root of bodhicitta. Compassion is the root of altruistic intention. And similarly, we find Chantakirti saying in his Guide to the Middle Way, compassion is such a high spiritual quality that maintains its relevance throughout all times. At the initial stage of a spiritual path, it is equally relevant and important while on the path, and it is also equally valid and relevant even when the individual has become full enlightenment. So what the point I'm trying to make is that if we look at any Mahayana literature, we will find that compassion is not only highly extolled, but also repeatedly emphasized its importance and how compassion really lies at the root of all spiritual endeavor.
다 되게 닝질이야. 그래 지다 닝질이 동해와 심지어 동해와를 미네. 아니 동해의 차나 사베 잔두 로제 드리신 바래. 얘네다 들려야 잔두 로디기 그게 로디기 가서 그게 누구로 들려야. 아니 자와 줄지 삼바로. 근데 그 잔두 삼기 닝지직다. 다 자와지 다게 적인 인사 뒤 항상 되는 소리가 다 가다 되게 다 가다 지 랑게 그게 좁긴 있어야지 되게 점득이 있어야게 그냥 거르니 리기도가
So generally when we talk about compassion, compassion is an aspiration that wishes others to be that object of your compassion to be free of suffering. But if we look carefully, there could be two levels of compassion or two degrees of compassion. In one case, the emotion may be simply at the level of wish, just wishing the other to be, that object of compassion, to be free of suffering. But there could be a higher level of compassion where the emotion goes beyond the simple wish, and there is an added dimension of wanting to do something, and a sense of responsibility, a sense of commitment, enters into your